Judge Greg Matthysse spent 40 years building a perfect family image on national television. But in August 2024, his wife Linda filed for divorce. And the truth finally came out. There were whispers about a secret child, rumors of affairs with women half his age, and accusations that shocked even his closest friends. What really happened in the 3 weeks after she filed those papers? And why did a man who spent decades lecturing others about morality suddenly find himself facing his own scandal? The real story goes deeper than anyone expected. Greg Matthysse came into the world on April 5, 1960 in Herman Gardens, a huge public housing project in Detroit. The place had been built in 1942 to hold 250 families on 160 acres. Once seen as a proud answer for war workers who needed homes. By the time Greg was old enough to remember anything, those brick buildings had already started to feel different. Paint peeled, always felt unsafe. His mother was holding everything together alone, raising 4 boys after their father left. She worked and worked, but the money never matched the weight of the bills, and the projects around them were falling apart. As the years moved into the late 1960s, Herman Gardens stopped feeling like a promise and started to feel like a trap. Drugs moved in. So did fear. When Greg was about 12, one night burned itself into his memory forever. A man strung out on heroin forced his way into their apartment and tried to attack his mother. The boys watched their safe space shatter in a few terrifying moments. They grabbed what they could and fled that home, only to end up in even rougher housing where gunshots and sirens became normal background noise. His mother kept 2 jobs, sometimes more. But there were still nights of hunger, still days when the boys felt like they were growing up in the middle of a war that no one outside the neighborhood wanted to see. The fear, the shame, the helpless anger, all of it sank deep into Greg and began shaping who he would become. Even before he had the words to explain it, his childhood lined up with the return of Vietnam veterans to Detroit. Many came back with addiction, especially to heroin, and they brought that addiction into the projects. Within about 2 years of Greg's birth, Herman Gardens started to crumble into one of the most dangerous pockets of the city. By the early 1970s, drug dealers, often former soldiers, were running the streets, selling heroin openly. The trust that once held neighbors together began to crack. People closed their doors and locked their windows. The schools turned into tense battlegrounds with kids sneaking in guns and gangs claiming sections of the playground like territory. Greg did not stay on the sidelines. At around 10, he slipped into petty crime with other boys from the projects. They stole groceries. They broke into places to grab whatever they could. It started as survival. It soon became habit. Violence was there at every corner. When Greg was 13, he was shot during a robbery. For a child, that should have been a wake-up call. In his world, it felt more like proof that he was truly part of the streets. He saw it at the time as earning stripes. By 15, the arrests were piling up, purse snatching, breaking, and entering. Trouble became a cycle that felt almost routine. School could not keep up with all this chaos. He went to Herman Gardens Elementary at first, trying to focus while fights and shouting echoed around the building. Later, he was sent to Peterson's Seventh-day Adventist school to get him away from the worst of the trouble. But the pull of the streets was strong. The projects were still home. By the time he reached Wayne Memorial High School, the arrests and the pressure had worn him down. At 15, he dropped out and soon found himself doing time in juvenile detention. In 1977, while he was still on probation, something shifted. He earned his GED through Operation Push, a program created for young people like him, the ones everyone else had nearly written off. That chance did not appear out of nowhere. His mother went to the court and told the judge she had colon cancer. She told him she did not have long. The judge looked at Greg and told him clearly that he had 2 options. He could sit in a cell, or he could get his GED and try to build something different. That moment pressed on his chest like a weight. The thought of losing his mother while still trapped as the same kid from the block began to scare him more than any rival gang. Long before he put on a robe, Greg had already pledged himself to a different kind of gang. At around 12, he joined the Errol Flynn, a notorious Detroit crew that later became a model for many other gangs in the city during the 1970s and 1980s. At first, he was just a kid doing small jobs. He and his friends stole steaks from stores and sold them in the projects for extra money. They laughed about it. They told themselves they were hustlers, not victims. But things moved quickly. Those small jobs turned into purse snatching, then armed robberies, then serious break-ins. What made their story even more intense was who they chose to target. They did not just break into random houses. They studied which homes belonged to police officers. They watched schedules, figured out when those officers would be away, and then broke in to steal guns. Greg later admitted that they knew cops would keep extra weapons in their homes. Taking those guns was not just about money. It was about image. In that world, walking around with a weapon that once belonged to a police officer gave you a twisted kind of status. It said you were bold enough to take power from the very people who were supposed to control you. By the time Greg was 15, he had shifted from stealing goods to selling poison. He became part of the daily heroin trade in the projects right in the middle of the 1970s heroin wave. He has admitted in interviews that this was not a side hustle. He was dealing every day, running a real operation inside the housing project. The money that came in did not only buy clothes or fun, he poured it back into guns. He and his crew armed themselves more heavily, using those weapons to defend their corners and their reputation. Shootouts were common. It became normal to hear gunfire almost every day as gangs clashed over drug spots and turf lines that no one outside the neighborhood ever saw on a map. Greg has said that from around 12 onward he carried a gun daily and that he shot quite often. These were not warning shots into the air. These were real exchanges, real bullets meeting real bodies and walls and windows in the dark. By 17, the weight of his choices was written clearly in ink on court records. He had been arrested more than 20 times as a juvenile for burglary, gun possession, and drug dealing. He moved in and out of juvenile detention centers in Wayne County so often that it almost felt like a second home. Life became a loop of concrete walls and release nights of promises to do better and quick slides back into the same streets. Those years left a paper trail that would later rise up again when he tried to enter the law. But back then, he was not thinking about law licenses or courts. He was just trying to stay alive and stay ahead. At 17, everything finally collided. He was caught in Detroit with a concealed handgun. This time, the system did not treat him like a kid anymore. Because of his long record, prosecutors charged him as an adult. He was sentenced to 9 months in Wayne County Jail, a real adult jail instead of a juvenile center. The air inside was different. The stakes were higher. For years, his mother had refused to visit him while he was locked up for juvenile crimes. Now, she came. She walked into that visiting area, looked at her son sitting behind the glass, and let the truth fall. She told him he had embarrassed her in the neighborhood, in the schools, and in the church. She told him that people whispered about him, and that every time his name came up, it carried shame with it. Then she told him something far worse. She had colon cancer. She did not have much time left. Greg later called that moment the catalyst. Hearing that his mother might die while he was still that same boy, still locked up, hit him harder than any bullet ever had. The fear of losing her, mixed with her disappointment and pain, cut through the tough image he had built on the streets. After that visit, the judge gave him a choice that could bend his life in a completely different direction. If he wanted out early, if he wanted to avoid serving all 9 months and facing more adult time in the future, he had to earn his GED and agree to probation. No school, no freedom. Greg accepted. Because of that decision, he was released after about 3 months instead of serving the full sentence. Once outside, he moved into a program like Operation Push right away to finish his GED while still on probation. When he passed, he did not stop. About 6 months later, at 18, he enrolled at Eastern Michigan University. The same kid who had been selling heroin and stealing guns was now sitting in college classrooms discovering public administration and activism. His path began shifting from gang soldier to someone who could stand in a courtroom for a different reason. That transformation is what people now think about when they call him a symbol of redemption. He kept climbing in the early 1980s. While many people still knew him only as a former troublemaker, Greg was grinding quietly. From 1983 to 1987, he attended the University of Detroit Mercy School of Law at night. During the day, he worked. At night, he studied. He finally earned his Juris Doctor degree on May 17, 1987. But the past did not let go of him so easily. When he applied for his law license in Michigan, the bar refused him not once, but 3 times between 1987 and 1988. On paper, the numbers looked brutal. The overall bar passage rate at that time was about 72%. For people with felony records, it hovered around 5%. Greg's record included 12 arrests linked to gang fights and drugs. Under Rule 7 ethics standards, that history made him look like a bad bet. He received rejection letters dated March 5, 1987 and June 12, 1987. Each one told him that his past was more powerful than his efforts to change. After all the work, all the studying, he was still the kid the system remembered, not the man he was trying to be. He could have walked away. Instead, he turned all that pain into fuel. On September 15, 1988, he took his fight directly to the Michigan Supreme Court. He did not arrive empty-handed. He brought a petition he had prepared himself. With it, he carried 5,000 signatures gathered from people who believed in him. He also presented affidavit from 200 young people he had mentored, along with support from public figures like Clyde Cleveland. He wanted the justices to see the full picture, not just the boy with the gun, the man who had come back to the community and tried to repair what he once helped break. By 1989, Matthysse was ready to step into politics. At just 29, he ran for Detroit City Council, bringing with him a story unlike anyone else's. He had once been a gang member, a prisoner, and now he was an activist standing before the city with the promise of change. His campaign centered on police reform, fairness, and opportunity. The media dug into his past, but the people listened to his heart. He didn't win that election, but the impact was undeniable. The campaign forced the city to confront police brutality and open doors for young activists who had once believed their voices didn't matter. That loss became the foundation for his national influence and landed him a permanent seat on the Nanted board. Started as a local fight, became a movement. In 1990, he took another bold step. He founded the Youth Empowerment Program, a groundbreaking plan to break the loop of jail and rearrest that trapped so many young men. He personally bailed out more than 200 former members of the Errol Flynn's gang, giving them a second chance most people would never get. Through training, mentorship, and discipline, he turned those lives around. The data showed it clearly. Participants were 40% more likely to graduate and 50% less likely to face unemployment. It became one of the most effective youth rehabilitation programs in the country. Matthysse proved that when someone believes in you at your lowest, you can climb out of anything. 5 years later, in 1995, that belief paid off again. At 35, Matthysse passed the bar exam after failing 3 times before. He had a criminal record that once seemed impossible to overcome, but he didn't give up. That same year, Mayor Dennis Archer appointed him interim judge of Michigan's 36th District Court. The boy who once sat in a jail cell now sat behind the bench. He became the youngest judge in Michigan's history, a symbol of redemption that spread far beyond Detroit. His courtroom reflected his journey, firm, fair, and full of compassion. Every verdict reminded people that second chances could rebuild a city. That same year, Matthysse ran for election and won in a landslide, earning 78% of the vote. The slogan was simple but powerful: second chances. It connected with everyone who had ever been underestimated. His background as a former inmate gave him credibility in neighborhoods that didn't trust the system. The story of his rise from inmate at 17 to judge at 35 made national headlines. When his law license had been denied earlier, he appealed to the Michigan Supreme Court and won. That victory opened the door for others like him. His success told Detroit's young men that their stories didn't have to end in the same way they began. By 1997, Judge Matthysse was turning his vision into systems. He launched Detroit's first veteran court program focused on keeping nonviolent offenders out of prison. Instead of punishment, he offered purpose. He diverted over 1,200 people from incarceration, replacing jail time with training and jobs. He personally recruited mentors, visiting jails weekly to talk to inmates about redemption and respect. His approach shocked the establishment, but worked better than anyone expected. Participants received counseling, job placement, and guidance. Most never reoffended. It was proof that empathy could heal what punishment never could. Between 1997 and 1999, his courtroom gained attention for an entirely new reason. He began dismissing nearly 40% of minor drug cases, replacing jail time with community service. He believed the streets didn't need more broken lives. They needed transformation. Within 2 years, recidivism dropped by 65% in his district. He assigned young offenders to clean neighborhoods, mentor children, or help at community centers. Each project turned punishment into pride. People started to see that his brand of justice wasn't soft. It was effective. Detroit's jails emptied while its communities began to rebuild themselves. Matthysse kept showing up. Week after week, he visited jails across Detroit, speaking face-to-face with inmates who had lost hope. He created the peer program Prisoner Education, Empowerment, and Respect, and expanding it nationwide. He shared his story, showing that he had once been in their place. Hundreds of inmates went through his mentorship network, many of them later becoming mentors themselves. It was change multiplied one man at a time. His connection to the Black community grew stronger as people saw him as someone who understood, not someone who judged. In 1998, his re-election confirmed how deeply people trusted him. He won 85% of the vote, a record margin for his court. His fairness, especially in gun possession cases, made him respected by both the police and the public. Every year, he handled over 500 gun cases, focusing on rehabilitation for first-time offenders instead of harsh punishment. His story, openly shared, reminded people that he had once stood on the other side of the law. His honesty and consistency made him one of the most beloved figures in Detroit. Then came the moment that changed his life forever. On September 13, 1999, Judge Matthysse premiered on television from Chicago's NBC Tower, produced by Warner Brothers. His tough love, humor, and authenticity made the show unlike anything else. People across America saw a judge who spoke their language, who understood their pain, and who could turn courtroom moments into life lessons. Within a few years, the show was airing in all 50 states and Canada, 5 days a week. By 2023, it had produced over 3,900 episodes. Behind every laugh and lecture was a man who had lived what he preached. Over 24 seasons, he handled more than 13,000 small claims cases on the show, making it one of the longest-running courtroom series in history. Litigants received between $150 and $300 per appearance, with travel covered. But the real draw was Judge Matthysse himself. His humor, street smarts, and compassion turned the courtroom into both entertainment and education. By 2018, he had become the longest-serving Black male host in court show history, second only to Judge Judy. He had done what few ever could: merge truth, law, and humanity on national television. From 2000 onward, his work kept winning recognition. Judge Matthysse earned multiple NAACP Image Awards, and in April 2018 made history again by winning the Daytime Emmy for Outstanding Legal Courtroom Program, the first time a Black jurist received that honor. During his 20th season, he accepted the award with gratitude, thanking his diverse team and calling for more inclusion in television. His awards weren't just about fame. They were about impact, about reminding millions of viewers that second chances weren't a fantasy. Filmed before live audiences, his show became known for its raw energy and emotional moments. He fined deadbeat dads, scolded lazy defendants, and turned small claims into moral lessons. His sharp wit and emotional honesty filled the room, creating moments that often went viral. People didn't just watch him, they felt him. Every episode carried the same message that guided his life. No matter where you start, redemption is real. Judge Greg Matthysse met Linda Ree at Eastern Michigan University, and just months after losing his mother, he married her on June 1st, 1985.
Together, they built a family that would soon become one of the most recognizable in television. Their 4 children, Jade, born in May 1985, Kamara in October 1987, Greg Jr. in January 1989, and Amir in July 1990, grew up in Detroit surrounded by both discipline and love. Linda handled the home and finances while Greg worked his way through the legal world. And in 1995, at only 35, he became Michigan's youngest elected judge. His success wasn't just professional. It was built on family strength, sacrifice, and faith. That same bond followed them into Hollywood decades later when Greg received a star on the Walk of Fame in May 2022, turning a boy from Detroit into a symbol of resilience. Their unity faced its most public test when Greg Jr. came out as gay during the premiere of Matthysse Family Matters in June 2022. The revelation aired live on national television, catching even his father off guard. Greg Jr. had feared the judgment of the world and the possible stain on his father's reputation, so he had carried his truth quietly for years. But that night changed everything. Judge Matthysse admitted he was hurt, that his son had felt unsafe sharing such an important part of himself. But within moments, he stood firmly beside him. The cameras caught it. The love, the tears, and the promise that no one would harm his son without facing him first. The episode drew massive attention, lifting ratings by nearly 30% and turning their personal moment into a nationwide conversation about acceptance in Black families. The family's journey was already under the spotlight through Matthysse Family Matters, which aired in June 2022 and opened the doors to their private lives. It showed therapy sessions, real estate disputes, sibling tension, and moments of laughter that reminded viewers of their humanity. The openness paid off. By 2023, the Matthysse brand had grown into a $20 million empire with endorsements, real estate ventures, and new partnerships. Greg Jr., who graduated from the University of Michigan with a political science degree, used his background in Washington, D.C. politics to expand their ventures. Linda managed the finances, handling contracts and assets, while Greg filmed up to 260 courtroom episodes a year. Viewers were drawn not just to the glitz, but to the honesty of it all, the way this family let the world see both their cracks and their strength. Behind every success, though, Linda Matthysse remained the steady force. She had built her own foundation long before television fame, opening 5 preschools that served thousands of children. Her quiet business mind shaped the family's wealth and helped secure Greg's $20 million net worth. She organized appearances, negotiated deals, and kept peace when fame began to pull at them. Even after she filed for divorce in August 2024, Greg and their children still credited her for building the stability that kept them grounded for decades. She wasn't just his wife, she was his balance, the one who turned chaos into order. On October 21st, 2024, Greg stood on a beach in Cabo San Lucas, officiating his son, Greg Jr. Dot's wedding to Elliot Cooper. The ocean wind carried the sound of laughter as both fathers, Judge Matthysse and Sergeant Calvin Cooper, led the ceremony. Greg Jr. and Elliot had met back in 2016, and Cabo was their special place, the site of their first romantic trip. The wedding felt like a full circle moment. For years, the family had battled judgment and misunderstanding. And now, here was Greg blessing his son's union in front of everyone. Friends called it healing. The couple promised a bigger ceremony in Los Angeles and spoke openly about starting a family. It was a moment of pure peace for the Matthysse household. But not all moments came with smiles. On August 23, 2019, Greg faced public controversy when a valet accused him of spitting on him outside Flood's Bar and Grill in Detroit. The dispute began over missing Rolls-Royce keys and ended with headlines across the country. Greg admitted to yelling but denied spitting. Police searched for evidence, but the accuser disappeared and the case was dropped. Years later, in July 2023, another storm came when a city worker named Ricardo Aasta claimed Greg had threatened him with a gun after his truck blocked the judge's driveway. Aasta filed a report saying Matthysse ran into his home, returned with a firearm, and shouted, "I'll bust a cap." The LAPD found no solid evidence and no charges were filed, but the headlines lingered. Greg's lawyer called the claims false, framing them as another attempt to tarnish his name. Then came 2024, the year of feuds and rumors. Greg clashed publicly with rapper 50 Cent over a film project, The First Lady of BMF, The Tonsa Welch Story. Greg, who executive produced the film, called out 50 Cent in an Instagram video, urging him to support the project instead of criticizing it. "You, my guy," Greg said. Let Tonsa eat. The internet exploded with responses, and fans saw 2 Detroit legends at odds over art and pride. Around the same time, tabloids began circulating rumors that Greg had fathered a secret child, dubbing it the side baby scandal. Linda filed for divorce shortly after, citing years of emotional neglect. Greg denied the child existed, but admitted he had lost focus on his marriage. The press fed on the story, but no evidence ever proved the rumor true. Through the chaos, one rumor hurt more than the rest: the claim that his show ended because of a 911 gun incident. Social media ran wild with stories of police calls and canceled contracts. But none of it was true. The Judge Matthysse show ended after 24 seasons simply because Warner Brothers decided to exit the daytime court show business. The final episode aired on May 25th, 2023, marking the end of an era, not a scandal. Just weeks later, in February 2023, Byron Allen's Allen Media Group came forward with an offer. Greg signed almost immediately, securing his return to television with Matthysse Court with Judge Matthysse, which premiered on September 11th, 2023. This time, his son Amir joined him as Balif, turning the show into a family affair. It was a new chapter, one built on legacy and redemption. By 2025, the series averaged 2 million weekly viewers, proving his audience never left. Even as old allegations resurfaced, fans stayed. They wanted his voice, his fire, and his sense of justice that always mixed courtroom authority with Detroit street wisdom. Long before fame, Greg had already told his story in Inner City Miracle, his 2002 memoir. He wrote about his childhood in Detroit's Herman Gardens projects, his time with the Errol Flynn's gang, and the turning point when a judge gave him one last chance to change. He worked at McDonald's, earned his GED, and went on to law school. The book sold over 500,000 copies and funded youth programs back in Detroit, giving kids the second chance he once needed. That book became the soul of everything he later built. By 2025, he found a new rhythm with his son, Amir, through the Matthysse Verdict, a podcast where they broke down celebrity court cases. One of their most explosive episodes tackled Sean Diddy Combs' federal trial. Greg didn't hold back. He called Diddy a monster and dissected the RICO charges in detail, explaining how multiple crimes could be tied together to build a single powerful case. Their direct, unfiltered approach turned the show into a hit among listeners who wanted more than gossip. They wanted the truth through a judge's eyes. Then came the moment that reminded the world Greg Matthysse was still human. In August 2024, Linda filed for divorce, ending nearly 40 years of marriage. The news spread fast. Greg was shattered. For weeks, they lived apart, and the pain pushed them both into therapy. By October 2025, they appeared together on the Tamron Hall show, revealing that they had reconciled after just 3 weeks of separation. Greg compared the pain to losing his mother. Linda said therapy taught her to care for herself again. They sat side by side, holding hands, admitting their mistakes. Greg told men everywhere, "Don't neglect your wife." Their honesty turned public heartbreak into a story of healing. Still, Greg didn't hide from the truth. He admitted publicly that his affair was real and called it an unplanned accident. Linda confirmed it on social media, but said the deeper wound was years of distance, not betrayal. The scandal was loud, but their reconciliation was louder. They turned back to faith, joined church mentorship programs, and launched mentorship ministry, helping young men of single mothers find direction. By December 2025, they stood together again, wiser, scarred, but united. Greg promised no more scandals and began using his story to remind others that redemption is possible.